I'm shiny today. Hey,
Whoa.
everybody, and welcome to Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. So today is the culmination of Raw Food Week. It's day 5, and we have with us Dr. Doug Graham, who will answer your questions. Many of them have been set in advance. And I want to thank you for watching this week because I think it's been a very eye-opening and interesting week to learn more about a different way of eating. I mean, it's really not that extreme, folks, because we're basically telling you to eat fruits and vegetables, which have been here like since the beginning of time. And really what I like to connect with my guests on where we agree, not where we disagree. And I think the bottom line is do a plant-based diet, preferably whole food. And bottom line, stop eating crap and eat veggies. And of course, fruit too. So please welcome back Dr. Doug Graham. I can't wait to hear from you.
Well, thank you so much. I've listened to all the talks for this week. I'm really impressed by each and every one. All the speakers have given me great feedback afterwards. They enjoyed it and enjoyed getting to know you as well. I'm looking forward to answering questions tonight, giving you a little bit more of the science rationale of why specifically I do raw foods the way that I do it. And how that came into being, but I'll answer anybody's questions along
I
the
would
way.
like to know your story because I really don't. You know, you probably don't remember this. We met so very briefly in Santa Monica, California. The year was 2000. You were a presenter at the very first culinary school I taught at, which was founded by Ryan Flevel, who's now a hotel restaurateur in Costa Rica. He had a place called Dick and Jane Cook Vegetarian on Pico, and you came there. You were really, really tan. You were wearing like shorts, no top, and you just did a cooking demo with like lots of bananas, and I was very impressed. And it was just very brief, but I remembered you, but I hadn't yet really heard about the philosophy or the 80-10 diet, 80-10-10 diet, which I believe you coined, which I think is a great name because even though I'm not raw, I think I kind of still do 80-10-10. You know what I mean?
Yes, you do.
Yeah. So talk about it and talk about why it's so healthy and how you first found it.
Okay, I know you say don't go back to the beginning, but really the beginning matters. And as a child, my mother grew up in New York City, in the Bronx, actually. The only place I think in the world where they add the word "the" into the name of the place. But because nobody's from the New Jersey, but you're from the Bronx. Anyway, my mom grew up in the city. My dad grew up as rural as it could possibly be. His mom gardened a lot, and so he was used to eating fruits and vegetables because that's what they had, and eating stuff right out of the ground and right out of the backyard. And it was interesting because, you know, my mom wants to wash everything and cook everything, and dad's showing me, hey, did you know you could even eat potato raw if you have to? Not that you would necessarily would, but it was just a very open. And I grew up in New Jersey. It was a farming area. We all summer long, at least, we bought a lot of produce from the local markets, straight from the farmers who would say, oh no, don't buy that corn. That was picked this morning. Here, let us go out to the field right now and get you some fresh corn. So it was an interesting opening. And like all kids, you know, we're trained to think we're super healthy. Unless somebody tells us we can't, we can. And I thought I was super healthy. I was very athletic, but I was also sick a lot. I had tremendous congestion problems, just tremendous congestion problems, and no idea why. At 4, I had my tonsils removed. It was very traumatic. I remember having to be held down because they were, you know, they pump you full of ether back then, and took 4 people to hold a 4-year-old down. But after I had the tonsils removed, then I really started getting sick a lot because now I don't have my first line of defense. And I started to really get sick a lot. Again, it was all congestion problems and allergies. And as a 5-year-old, they weren't going to let me out of kindergarten because I didn't attend enough days. My grades were great, but I just didn't have great attendance. And at 6, I started going for allergy shots. And the allergist told me all the things I was allergic to, and most of them were foods, but a lot of environmental stuff too, a lot of grasses and pollens and animal danders and all that, but allergies. So whereas nerds never leave the house unless they have, you know, pens in their pocket with that little thing to protect their pocket so you don't get ink on the shirt. In that pocket, I carried a little packet of Kleenex I carried tissues. I never left the house without tissues because I was always going through a pack of tissues and always relying on allergy pills and getting allergy shots every week from age 6 till 12. So, which wasn't fun. The doctor explained to me, I still remember him, and he explained to me that I was allergic to my own antibodies, basically allergic to myself. And that if I ever got sick, if I ever reacted to anything by producing antibodies, I was allergic to them. So I would produce more antibodies to which I was allergic. And he said, I'm just going to have to live with it. I had my first experience of medical intervention, or I guess that's my second because tonsils were gone already, but I had my second experience of medical intervention because every so often he would vacuum. He would have to vacuum up my nose and go up into all my sinuses with a vacuum tube and then vacuum my sinuses. It's an experience no one should ever have to. I mean, I'll put that among the worst things that's ever happened to me. And as a kid, I had to endure it. So I didn't really outgrow these allergies. They got worse in many ways, and my eyes started to shut. My lungs started to shut. I never had full-blown asthma, but I was getting closer and closer to that direction. And as an athlete kid, eating everything and anything, eating my weight in dairy every year, eating my weight in meat every year, eating my weight in candy every year, eating I only ate one meal a day. It wasn't that I ate that much. I only ate one meal a day, but it was from when I woke up until I went to bed. And I occasionally stopped snacking in order to sit down and eat a meal. But basically, I just continually ate. And I was always wanting more. I was always hungry. Part of that's being an athlete. Part of that's being a kid. But part of it was that the food was never satisfying because I eventually experienced what satiation was about, which I'll get to in a minute. So I had a health teacher, a very serious guy that I respected tremendously, my physical education teacher, Jim Asbell, in 7th grade. And he said fruits and vegetables were good for you. In high school, I took health courses every year, and the teacher was a guy named Joe Rosati. Joe Rosati, you might have heard of him. He's the guy who said, okay, boys, pair up in threes. I don't know if you ever heard that, but I'm still trying to figure that out.
I have heard that. I don't know where I've heard that, but that is.
That was from Joe Rosati. And he said, fruits and vegetables are really important for an athlete. Well, I went to college and studied health and physical education. I took nutrition every semester. And the teachers all stressed the importance of fruits and vegetables. What they actually said was that fruits and vegetables were the most nutritious foods for humans. They said, they're the best for us, fruits and vegetables. We need to eat more fruits and vegetables. In my professional training, I was fortunate. I became a chiropractor, and I could take nutrition courses every semester, although most of them ended up being, higher levels of organic chemistry, but it was still nutrition, really. And what we learned was that fruits and vegetables were good for you, that they were more nutritious than other foods, and that we should eat more fruits and vegetables. Well, and I got to the point where I said, gee, I wonder what would happen if I ate fruits and vegetables like everybody's been telling me all the way through school. Even back in 3rd grade, where the nurse had a sign that said an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Okay, so I wonder what would happen if I ate only the foods that were best for us to the exclusion of everything else. And everybody said the same thing. When I asked them about this, they all my advisors and coaches and mentors, and I went to people and said, gee, I have this idea. I wonder, and they all said, fruits and vegetables are good for you, but you can't just eat fruits and vegetables. And I'm going, if they're the best, doesn't that mean everything else is less than best or second or third or fourth? I want the best. Why wouldn't I want the best for myself? I want to be as self-constructive as possible. Okay, maybe in my 20s, I wanted to be a little bit self-destructive, but I want to be as aware as possible. And maybe, again, back in my college days, I was trying to dull down my awareness a few times. I got distracted here and there, but as an adult, I want to be as aware as I possibly can. I want to know what's going on. I want to remember if I have a good time. If I see somebody again, I want to remember their name. I want to be able to learn stuff for as long as I can. I want to maintain my physical health, my emotional health, my mental health, my chemical health. I want to feel good. It's not about living forever, but I sure want to feel good for the whole time I live. Although as far as living forever goes, I mean, so far so good. I mean, maybe that could happen. I don't know. We do know that vegetarians live longer than people on a mainstream diet by about 7 years. And we know that vegans outlive vegetarians on the average by about 8 more years. Well, although there is some bias in the vegan movement, and I try to avoid all the bias, but there is some bias. Somebody once told me I wasn't invited to a specific vegan event because I'm a raw fooder, as if raw fooders weren't vegans also. And I go, yeah, but I'm vegan. Why would you want to be exclusive? There's not that many vegans out there in the world, you know? So I went raw and an amazing thing happened. Things that I couldn't do a day or two before I went raw, I could do. And one of them was run. I've always tried to run. All my life, I tried to run, but I'd always get out of breath. Always just get out of breath. And I went raw, and this friend invited me to go run. And I go, nah, I really can't run. All right, I'll try, because it was a guy that I really wanted to spend more time with. And so I tried, and we went 6 or 7 miles, and it's like I'd been unleashed, and I didn't know where it came from, because I'd never run farther than a mile in my whole life. Even when I joined a cross country team, I couldn't finish the course in high school as an athlete. And so that was profound. I go, holy cow, what happened? And then shortly thereafter, something even more weird happened, which is my dad trained me really well in vocabulary. He really trained me well. I've learned later in life that he trained me really well. And he would give me 5 words every week. And the next week I had to give him the definitions of those 5. And then I get my allowance was tied into that. And so, I mean, you know, you learn 5 words a week for 10 years, you got a lot of words. And often when I was talking with people, I knew there was a word that I wanted to use, but I couldn't recall it. I could define it. I could tell people what it was, and then they'd say the word, and I go, yeah, that's it. Have you ever had that happen? Where you know the word, but you can't pull it out?
Yeah, it's so frustrating. I usually ask Alexa.
Well, that stopped happening. All of a sudden, I had access to all my words. It was really weird. And then I had access to memories, and I could remember stuff that I didn't even know I could remember. And all of a sudden I could remember stuff. I could remember French that I learned in school, where I thought I'd never really learned French. I just took the course, but couldn't remember. But all of a sudden I could talk a little bit in French. And then other things like that started happening. I don't have a unique storytelling style, but my style is that I digress a lot. I love to digress when I talk. I love to change topic and fraction off, like you're diagramming sentences like we used to do as a kid, and then fraction and fraction and fraction, and then eventually get back to the point using all of those stories to get back to making the point. And you go, wow, really, there's a lot of support to this idea. And what would happen is I'd be talking to friends. I remember I was doing it with Jack Miller one time, and I said to him, what were we talking about? And he couldn't remember, and I couldn't remember. And that happened so many times. Have you ever talked to a friend and all of a sudden you go, what were we talking about? I mean, that happens to everybody. There's even a name for it. And that used to happen to me all the time. It was very frustrating. I didn't want to lose. I didn't like to give a presentation and then realize that I'd started a story and couldn't bring it back and didn't remember to ever make the point and things like that. And all of a sudden that just plain stopped. And I knew it stopped. I realized it stopped, but then I wanted to start showing people in my presentations that it stopped. So I would ask people in the lecture, hey, do you know where this is going? Do you know what we were talking about? Do you know why I'm telling you this? And no one would ever know. And I go, it's because this is what we were talking about. And they go, oh yeah, the gorilla thing or the whatever it was. So for me, it was just huge revelations happened inside my head. I could think, I could remember. Oh yeah, I could breathe. I had more energy. I noticed profound things happen. I noticed a 25% reduction in need for sleep.
Yeah, that was
25% reduction is a huge reduction. Not that I wanted to sleep less, but I wanted to recover more because I was a professional athlete. I was doing a lot of sport. I enjoy sport. I enjoy the movement. I don't exercise because I have to. I exercise and am active because I love to be active. I like to do stuff.
You've got to talk about that, because I was raw for an entire year, and that was I only needed 4 hours sleep, and I wanted to sleep more, but I couldn't. And why is that? Because there was just too many hours in the day. But by the way, Sherry Likes Fruit, who's been watching all week, just made a super chat donation, so thank you very much.
There we go. So there was a lot of things going on, and I'm having revelations, and I went vegetarian for a reason that most people don't. Okay. I mean, we talked about this the other day, why all the reasons people go vegetarian, right? And I went vegetarian for a different reason. When I was in college, I was living with two guys and in an apartment, and we kind of were eating cheap food, and cheap food meant a lot of pasta, rice, potatoes, corn. And in my senior year of high school, I met this girl who she told me she was vegetarian. And I said, I'm a vegetarian too. And that was my reason for going vegetarian, which nobody's told me that. So I realized actually that I was very close, and I went vegetarian and lived vegetarian. And like most vegetarians, you think you've arrived. I was vegetarian for the best part of 7 years. But the whole time you're vegetarian and you go on all the vegetarian conferences and you're doing all the things and attending the meetings and meeting the people. And the one thing you just keep hearing is vegan, 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 vegan. And to a vegetarian, a vegan's kind of like the health nut. They're the bothersome people who like, leave it alone already. I've already gone vegetarian, But once I decided to try vegan, it was so much better. It was just so much better. But I was only vegan for a few months before going raw. It became obvious that if vegan was an improvement over vegetarian, that raw vegan had to be an improvement over cooked vegan for so many reasons, like Dr. Tim talked about, the partially combusted hydrocarbons, which, PCH, I mean, it's not just Pacific Coast Highway. It's not just that Madison Square Garden for MSG. We have other uses. And my goodness, there's so many reasons. It wasn't just the tremerogens, the mutagens, the carcinogens, the teratogens. It wasn't just it wasn't just anti-nutrients and antivitamins. There were so many reasons for not cooking food that when I actually looked into it and realized that have you ever heard that if aspirin was discovered today, that we could no longer legalize aspirin because it's so rife with problems that it never would have made it past we only have aspirin because it got grandfathered in when we started legalizing drugs. And by the time I looked into FDA regulations and then looked into Environmental Protection Agency regulations, and then did some homework, I realized that if today everybody in the world ate raw, And then somebody said, hey, you could cook food. And here, oh, look, it tastes like this, or it smells like this, or it does this, or it does that. That if cooked food was discovered today, we couldn't legalize it. The Environmental Protection Agency would never let it out because it's so destructive to human health that it would never be approved for human consumption. It's just that it came in through the back door, it got grandfathered in, and the Environmental Protection Agency came in later than cooked food did. So I'm sitting here going, wow, I'm learning all this science. I'm learning the chemistry. I'm hearing the stuff. I'm learning about Humpty Dumpty. You know about Humpty Dumpty? You couldn't put the, back in the eggshell. And I watched the TV commercial, this is your brain on cooked food. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Except they said this is your brain on drugs, but it was the same thing, because what they showed you is that when you drop an egg on a frying pan, it changes irrevocably and you can't put it back together again. They were trying to convey the fact that it was fried, but truly what I saw was the chemistry, like taking a hair and holding it over a flame. And then I learned the chemistry going through school and what's actually happening. And what's happening is called recombinant chemistry, where we're taking protein structures and literally breaking them apart and then twisting them and putting them back together, creating what are known as denatured proteins. We're creating molecules for which the human body has no digestive enzymes. Inaccessible. They're called enzyme resistant bonds. And this happens to all the proteins when we heat them, to varying degrees, depending on how much heat, obviously. But it's happening. We're creating enzyme resistant bonds. And being a doctor, I have access to a ton of information, but so does everybody else. We all know what happens when we get our lab work back, when we get our blood work back. We get a whole bunch of lab work, and we don't want to be high and we don't want to be low. It's like Goldilocks. You want it to be just right. You want to be in the parameters. And yet we were sold nutrition on the concept of more is better, which isn't true. More isn't better. That's like having a size 20 shoes instead of the size you wear. It's not better. More isn't better. In fact, more is typically, as I think you said the other day, diseases of excess, but more is also a problem because for all the fat soluble vitamins, if you have more of those, you die. You get hypervitaminosis A and you die. With the water soluble vitamins, you don't die, but you get very uncomfortable, too much vitamin C, and you get diarrhea. It's almost it's just diarrhea. And it's not fun either. So too much of nutrients, you get too much iodine and you get the exact same symptoms as you would if you had not enough iodine. That's a really weird one. That's hard to tell which is which. You have to do a little more homework. But more isn't better, even though that's how we were sold the idea of nutrition. So we had to look at a lot of things, and having access to the information really changed the way I view things, because I started to understand the science. It started to come together in ways that wasn't just theory anymore. And I started thinking about sports nutrition, because sports nutrition is sold to us in a different package than medical nutrition. Sports nutrition is sold to us in a package that's duplicable. If it works for one athlete, it's going to work for the other athletes. They have to kind of tell you the truth. It's not based on, well, we want to sell this product as the result of, whatever it is. So it's not like it's more reliable nutrition, I think, in many ways. And having a background in sports and having access to athletes and all this interest in sports, it led me down an interesting road, because when I got out of school and I opened up my health retreat, and I'm fasting terribly ill people, really ill people. I'm seeing sick people who have been told by the medical people that there's nothing else can be done, which translates, when we translate that into English from medicalese, translate that in English, it means there's nothing else that we can do for you. So we're not going to waste your time anymore. We can't figure out a way to charge you for anything we're going to do. But there were people who had lost hope, and yet they still hoped. They were told nothing could be done. And I'm watching sick people get well at a fasting retreat when all we do is get out of the way and let the body heal itself by no longer putting in the negative things, the self-destructive things that they were habitually using on a daily basis. And we stopped those things and they would heal. Body heals itself, just like we always knew it did. When you get a cut, it heals itself. You get a bruise, it heals itself. You break a bone, it heals itself. And all of a sudden we've lost track of some of that. So I'm watching that happen, and I'm looking at how it happens in the most critical care situations, like the intensive care unit of a hospital. You look in the intensive care unit of a hospital, and there's their temperature, blood pressure, respiration rate, how much fluid goes in, how much fluid goes out, how everything's being monitored all the time. And they're trying to keep you in very, very tight parameters, a condition that you would call homeostasis, where things hardly change at all, and just drip the nutrition into people. And even if they're in a coma, they're being given the exact same stuff. They're being given a clear fluid that's got sugar and salt in it. Basically, it's got sugar and salt.
Yeah.
And they get well enough to leave the intensive care unit and go back to the hospital, hopefully to get even better than that and go home someday. But somehow, nobody in the intensive care unit goes up to the doctors and says, "Where do you get your protein?" They're just being given water, sugar, and salt. No protein. And people get well. And it's pretty remarkable that that happens all the time and nobody sees it. So I looked at all this monitoring that's going on. I looked at the way the nutrition was being utilized. And I go, in the entire world, the people in the intensive care unit are more concerned about recovery than anybody else in the world, except for one other group of people: world-class athletes. They're worrying about recovery too, because as we all have experienced, we know how to train far in excess of our ability to recover. We can be sore for a week after a hard workout, and we could do all sorts of things to train harder than we can recover. We have to hold ourselves back sometimes. But even the world-class athletes can do that. They can train harder than they can recover. And if you can recover in 24 hours, but you train every 22 hours, because you train for 2 hours, and then you only got 22 hours until the next training, you're losing ground. And once a week or once every 6 days or once every 8, you're going to have to take a day off at some point, and you're losing ground to the competition that doesn't have to take that day off. So I started wondering, how can I help world-class athletes recover by using the exact same principles that we use in the ICU? And say, what do those people get that the athletes aren't getting? Let's apply those same things and let's see what happens. And so we started jimmying things around a little bit and saying, okay, well, what's the nutritional considerations? Sugar and salt. It's like, there's not a lot more. It was pretty funny. It was really, really funny. It's like, an athlete asked me today, is that really it? Just eat fruit after I exercise? And I go, yeah, that's really it. That is the secret. That is the big deal. It's not a big deal to do it. The big deal is overcoming all the other stuff about not using iPads and not using supplementation and not using gimmicks and gadgets and not using hot and cold and on and on and on through the various ways. So I saw that going on. I said, let's define recovery. I started defining recovery. Instead of just recovery being one thing, I got into more depth with it. Now I have 9 stages of recovery that I can define for an athlete, from what happens in between points to what happens in between years, and on, through all those steps and stages, and how can we help recovery happen on each one of those phases. And 40 years ago, people used to ask me what I do, and I said I was a lifestyle coach. But nobody had ever heard of that. But then people started calling themselves life coach. And I go, no, I don't do what they do. I have to find a new name. And eventually now, have you ever heard of a personal trainer? Sure, everybody's heard of personal trainers. Well, I'm a personal recoverer. So I'm helping people recover their abilities so that they can be their best at what they do. I can either be a health nut or I can be a health connoisseur. I can either be the odd man out in the medical community, the only doctor in the world doing what I'm doing, or I can be a specialist in what I'm doing, leading the world towards what I see as obvious, that's bringing the best results I've ever seen, not only with the sickest of the sick, but also with the world-class performers and helping them do better. And all we have to do for us to do better in our lives is apply some or all of what they do. If we do what they do, we will get the results they get. So, as I said the other day, eat more fruits and vegetables. If we can increase the percentage of fruits and vegetables on our plate every single meal, if we eat more fruits and vegetables, we're going in the right direction. What kind of fruits and vegetables? Whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic plants. I mean, it's just that simple. You can cut it down to 5 words: whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic. Obviously, plants, 6 words. So I'm encouraging people to go in that direction, and it fostered a lot of questions, as it does. And I love questions. I love thinking on my feet. I'd much rather think on my feet than on my seat. And I started answering the questions, and I'm amazed at all the questions. So a lot of the questions were nutritional, and I only knew the conceptual answers, but I knew how to get the answers. So I started looking up the nutrition, and lo and behold, the nutrition made sense. The math adds up perfectly over and over and over and over. And we see that the longest lived peoples of the world eat a high carbohydrate diet. We look at the world-class performers, they eat a high carbohydrate diet. We look at all of the animals that are anatomically and physiologically similar to us, the anthropoid primates, and they all eat a carbohydrate-based diet. They all eat hot. Now, they can't go to the grocery store. They can't get exactly what they want every time. So they do eat a bug now and then, but it's out of necessity. You can eat one if you want, if you happen to see a cockroach going by and you want to eat it, but I don't want to. It doesn't look like food to me. But I have access to mango. And if I have to choose between cockroach and mango, or cow and mango, I'm going for mango. So, like a cat whose mouth waters when it sees a bird, my mouth waters when I see mangoes hanging on a tree. My mouth waters when I see fruit hanging, almost any kind of fruit hanging from a tree. It's mouth, because it's our natural food. It's our inclination. All the chemistry that goes on in our body works perfectly on fruits and vegetables. All the right things happen. It's the weirdest thing that all of the things that we are designed to require in order to be healthy, physical activity, some social time, rest and sleep, fresh air, sunshine, fruits and vegetables, all of the things that we're required to participate in order to be healthy are pleasurable experiences. I think that's kind of neat, and I think it tells the whole story. They're all pleasurable experiences. And if we can increase the percentage of fruits and vegetables on the plate, whole, fresh, ripe, or organic plants, I'm looking at the science and I'm going, wow, I can't find a downside. Like, oh yeah, eating all that fruit's really good for you in every single way, except it's bad for your teeth. Well, no, it's not bad for your teeth. It's actually what our teeth are designed to eat, is fruits and vegetables. Or they go, oh, it's good for you in every single way, except you're going to run into some other problem. Oh, no, I haven't run into any problems. I've been going 40 years. I haven't run into any problems. It just keeps getting better and better, in fact. I'm thinking clearly. I'm still playing around with kids half my age and beating them in a lot of things. I still, everything works. Like Shari was saying, everything works. I got all my parts and everything works. How glorious is that? How many guys my age can say that everything works on the program they're on? It just doesn't happen. And I looked and I go, you know what? Let's find out what's really going on. And here's the bottom line of what's really going on. Then we'll open up to questions. There's 2 things happening You breathe and you eat. And when you breathe, oxygen goes in your lungs, and then it goes to your bloodstream, and then it gets to your cells. And when you eat, food goes into your digestive system, and then it goes to your blood, and then it goes to your cells. Essentially, everything's got to get to your cells. You've got to get glucose, which is the primary fuel for every cell of the body, and you got to get oxygen to every cell of the body. Those two are imperative, or bad things happen pretty quickly. In life, in health, in sickness, in sport, you got to get glucose and you got to get oxygen to every cell of the body. And scientists discovered as early as the 1950s and have proven thousands of times since that when dietary fat percentage rises into double digits, predictable health decline happens. And it's predictable because it happens in a predictable way. Either you compromise the delivery of oxygen to the cells, or you compromise the delivery of glucose to the cells, or both. And depending on whether you get one, the other, or both, determines whether you have a heart attack, diabetes, or both. Cancer, digestive disorder, or both. But all of the major disorders are predicated on the uptake, transport, and delivery of glucose and oxygen into, through, and out of the bloodstream. That's simple. And what we found is as the dietary fat, not how fat you are, that's a separate factor, but how much fat you eat compared to your total calories per day. So if you eat 2,000 calories a day and your fat intake goes much beyond 200 into double digits, 10%, once you go much past 10%, you're into predictable health decline, which is almost unnoticeable until you get past 20%. But then the average American's eating 45%. So predictable health decline is predictable. and the average raw fooder, is eating 60 or 70% fat in their diet. They're thumbing their nose at nutritional science, but they prove something. They prove that by the fact that, and I'm going to say every raw fooder that goes about it that way with the high raw food, high fat diet, they don't stay in it for the long term, which is why I wanted to bring you people 4 out of 5 who've been going 30 years or more on the same dietary program. It's not an experiment anymore. They found something that works and they're just working it like a charm. And Ifat was more than happy to say, I'm a newcomer. I've only been at this for a decade. All right. And to me, this tells a completely different story than a new kid on the block, saying, oh, look at me, I'm eating raw food, I'm eating coconut oil, and I'm having da-da-da. And I'm going, fine, talk to me in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, talk to me still, let me see if you're even still involved in the vegan aspects, because most of them aren't. They came, they went, they proved to me, okay, 80-10-10 is a terrible name and a wonderful name. Okay, because the name of a book is supposed to tell you a story. It's supposed to create an image in your mind. The South Beach diet. And you see this girl who's amazingly tan with the longest legs in the world with a white bikini on rollerblades going down South Beach, and you go, hot. It's hot. There's beach involved. All titles are supposed to create a picture in your mind or a mystery. 80-10-10 is the mystery because nobody knows what it means. I started looking at diets And what do people eat around the whole world? And the worldwide average for consuming protein is 11%, which is pretty close to 10, but the worldwide average is 11%. The doctors already told us once we go past 10% fat, we're into predictable health decline. And we know what kind of decline it's going to be. And we know why it's going to be each of those things. And on a day where we had a lot more time, we could talk about how does it become cancer? How does it become diabetes? How does it become candida? How does it become heart disease? But it's always going to be those things because those are the only possible outcome of eating a high fat diet. And we go through all that. And then we look at what are recommended. And what's recommended is we have to say what's the minimum. And it turns out if your protein consumption goes much below 3%, there's a good chance you're going to run into problems. But if it goes over 10, there's a good chance you're going to run into problems. That's those parameters that we talked about earlier, where if it's not too much and not too little, and we fall right into the range. But if the protein is cooked, then something really happens funny with that range because your temperature is supposed to be 98.6. And if it goes to 95, you're in problem. And if it's up to 101, you're in problem. It's pretty tight parameters. And your respiratory rate and your blood pressure and your blood calcium and all of these things, very tight parameters, except for one thing. They measure white blood cell count. And normal white blood cell count's like around 2.5 million to 18 million. Could you imagine if your temperature went up by 9 times and all of a sudden, oh, and his temperature today was 860? Well, that wouldn't really work. I mean, and the only reason that's considered normal, again, the cooked food thing is considered normal because everybody did it before we set the standards for what's normal. The only reason that's considered normal is because everybody eats cooked food. And the proteins, the cross-linked, denatured, enzyme-resistant proteins that we talked about earlier, the body responds to those as if they're foreign invaders. And so it sets out all American cells, the white blood cells. You use them once and throw them away. And you have this flood called the white tide that enters into the bloodstream of white blood cells, raising the normal temperature, what's called preprandial, before you eat. The normal white blood cell count is around 3 million. But after you eat, it soars up to 15 or 18 million and then goes back down to 3 million. And that's considered normal. And it happens to everybody if you're eating cooked food. But it doesn't happen at all on raw food, making me think maybe normal actually is normal. And 3 million is where it's supposed to be all the time. And that 18 isn't normal. It's just what everybody has. And to me, I learned about a condition called AIDS. And in the condition called AIDS, what happens is your white blood cell count crashes. It just crashes. It goes below the 3 million. It goes below the 2 million. And if I get tested for AIDS solely through a white blood cell count, people might think I was very, very sick. And there's lots of things like that where athletes look sick until you find out they're athletes. And then you go, oh, your heart only beats 35 times a minute. That's perfectly fine for you. You're an athlete, or you only breathe 6 times a minute. Yeah, that's wrong, except, oh, you're an athlete. That's okay. Or lots of things are like that. And certainly white blood cell count. Oh, you're a raw fooder. That's a normal white blood cell count for a raw fooder. It's just not normal for everybody else. The only other people we see with such a low white count are people who are deathly ill and can no longer produce sufficient white blood cells because they are an all-American cell. Use them once, throw them away. Eventually, if you constantly use, you overuse, and eventually you crash. And then we fall into that other situation. So for me, I'm going, wow, what else could tie this together? And the last one was fat. And you got to have fat. I mean, it's the greatest pickup line in the world, right? Where do you get your omegas? What a nice line. But if I go to you and say, where do you get your fat? I'm going to get a slap in the face. But where do you get your omegas? Omegas they're just fat. You know? So it's all how you say it. But a lot of studies gone into fat. And what doctors have found out is you got to have some fat. And if you go below 3%, you could get into trouble. You got to eat some fat. Fortunately, if all you eat is fruits and vegetables, your protein intake is going to be around 7%. And if all you eat is fruits and vegetables, your fat intake is going to be 7 to 9%. So if all you eat is fruits and vegetables, incorporated in those fruits and vegetables is enough protein and enough fat for us to do fine, to fall into the parameters that are recommended between 3 and 10. Because if you go over 10% fat, predictable health decline, over 10% protein, predictable health decline, below 3. And if you're somewhere between 3 and 10 on fat and 3 and 10 on protein, your carbohydrate intake, since there's only 3 sources of calories, your carbohydrate intake has to, by definition, be above 80. Hence, 80-10-10. As a guideline, as a pretty rough shot for not, I never eat a bite of an avocado. Of course I do. I eat nuts and seeds, but my overall average of calorie intake through the course of a week, a month, a year is always going to be more than 80% of my calories come from carbohydrates and fewer than 10% fat, fewer than 10% protein. Or if you want it as a range, less than. Depends on whether you want a number or a range. And that's the rationale. And the science just sits so well. And people go, yeah, well, it's really good if you're an athlete. Well, it's really good if you're not an athlete. You just don't eat as much food. It's really good if you're I've had people say it's really good if you're an endurance athlete, but not for strength. And then other people say it's really good for strength, but not for endurance. And I go, no. It's really good for people. It's what people eat. Horses eat grass and people eat fruits and vegetables. End of story. It's called a species-specific approach. If you were put in a zoo, and this was done once, but if you were put in a zoo and the zookeeper didn't know what to give you, he'd say, well, what other animals are anatomically and physiologically like you? And you go, oh, well, there's the orangutan and the chimpanzee and the bonobo and the gorilla and the silverbacks and lowland and highlands. And you go, oh, yeah. They all eat fruits and vegetables. Let's give this new creature fruits and vegetables and see how it does. And the odd thing was that when this experiment was actually done, I think it was done out in the Eden Project in England. When they actually did this experiment and they put a bunch of people into a zoo situation, it gave them nothing but raw fruits and vegetables for 30 days. The people did fine, but all their diseases disappeared. So somebody came in with obesity, that went away. Somebody came in with heart disease, that went away. Somebody came in with diabetes, that went away. All their conditions, which wasn't part of the experiment, it wasn't initially picked to do that, but they found out, wow, I just can't stay sick on this diet, which was kind of cool. But it was an unanticipated effect that nobody had really, they just wanted to see what was going to happen mentally, emotionally to people who only get fruits and vegetables for a month. Would they come apart? And long before the Big Brother kind of reality shows, this was done prior to that. I don't know when it was done, the 80s or the 90s, I think. So that's the concept. It's a very simple concept. Eat more fruits and vegetables. If you're eating more fruits and vegetables than you used to, you're heading in the right direction. The speed is up to you. It's just like if I ask you where the bathroom is, I want you to tell me the location. Whether I walk or run is up to me. So your sense of urgency of how quickly do you want to transition to fruits and vegetables? How self-supportive do you want to be? How nurturing do you want to be to yourself? I think adults need adult-sized portions of nurturing. Personally, I think life for an adult is a little tougher than it is for a kid. And kids get nurtured totally. I think adults need more nurturing than that, We should be nurturing ourselves constantly. We should be self-constructive behavior, self-constructive thoughts, self-constructive foods, things that support our overall development so that we can get on with all the things that are interesting to us, whatever they may be. As the saying goes, you know, if you're healthy, you might have 100 different goals. But if you're unhealthy, you only have one goal. So I find it funny, people still ask me, how am I? As a kind of an opening line, you know, how are you, Doug? You know, I haven't seen you in a month, or I haven't seen you in a year. And I go, that's not even a question you need to ask me. I haven't been sick since this whole thing started back in the late 70s, and I just haven't been sick since. So like, asking me about my health is a waste of time. I'm healthy. I'm expecting better.
How many years? You got to tell me how many years has it been?
Well, I don't really know. Honestly, I don't really know, because A, I didn't know what I was heading towards, and B, it wasn't overnight success. There was a lot of years of failure, a lot of years where I would go 100% raw for 9 months and then lose the plot, or 100% raw for a week and then lose I didn't know why I was losing the plot. I knew raw was the way to go. And I started that transition in the late 70s. And I started going towards raw. And then by the early 80s, it was like, it has to be fruits and vegetables. I remember being in medical school going, it has to be fruits and vegetables. And anything else just doesn't make sense. But I don't know how to do it, because like you said, there's a lot of volume involved. It was inconceivable amounts. The quantities were inconceivable. The idea that you have to eat fruit for breakfast, fruit for lunch, all the fruit you care for before your dinner meal of salad was inconceivable, that it could be that much fruit. And I didn't understand it until I did the math. And in order to come up with 80-10-10, you've got to eat a lot of fruit, or you don't supply your carbohydrate needs. And if you don't supply your carbohydrate needs, then you will predictably have cravings. You're going to have one of 4 cravings. You're either going to crave starches, because you've been trained to, even though it's paste, even though we know that you make wallpaper paste out of starch, even though it's called in Italian pasta, even though it's called in French pastry, even though you're not supposed to eat the paste in school, and it's the same paste.
Why do these foods exist? I mean,
these foods are phenomenal. These foods are incredible. These foods are awesome. We manipulated them in order to create the grains that are available today. But why do they exist? It's not like everything's here just for us. First
who's it for? I mean, potatoes.
Well, there are birds. There are grazing creatures. There are horses and cows and all antelopes and deer, and there are lots of grazing creatures that like to eat grasses. But if you were in a field of wheat the size of Kansas, you'd die before you got out. If you were in a field of mangoes the size of Kansas, you'd never leave. So it's not like it's people food. You have to cook it. Anything that you have to cook in order to eat. I mean, there's 2 kinds of carbohydrates, AJ. I know you know this. There's simple and there's complex. The reason they're called simple and complex has to do with the chemistry. And we don't have to teach chemistry. We can give people an easier way to remember. Simple sugars all are so simple to digest that they require none. Simple sugars take no digestion. They taste sweet to the tip of your tongue. They're already in a pre-digested form. Those are simple. Complex carbohydrates are too complex to digest. Hence, if you look up the definition of starch, it is flavorless. It's not bland. It's flavorless, because we can't digest it unless we cook it. Well, by the time we cook it and we start getting into carcinogens and mutagens and teratogens and tumorigens and tremorogens and anti-nutrients and on through this whole range of 0 vitamin C. You know, Linus Pauling in 1952 won a Nobel Prize for telling us that we need 100 times the amount of vitamin C than the average person gets. And he was ridiculed by some because How can we ever get 100 times the vitamin C that normal people get on a normal diet? And then I did the math, and I get 100 times the vitamin C. I get exactly the vitamin C levels that Linus Pauling said will give you bulletproof health. And all you got to do is eat fruits and vegetables. Just do what all your teachers have told you your whole life. Fruits and vegetables are good for you. All we have to do is give like a little nod to that science occasionally and have a piece of fruit now and then. It's not a big deal. Yes, I love to eat, but the freedom that I got when I went raw was I suddenly started being satiated to a point where automatically I stopped snacking. Where I'd been eating, as I said, constant snacking, I stopped snacking entirely. The meals were so satiating that I eat a meal, 5, 6, 7 hours later, I eat a meal and I'm done. And I don't think about food in between. Yes, I'm a chef. I love to make food. I think about all sorts of stuff related, but I'm not like always, what am I going to eat next? What am I going to, oh, I can't leave the house without food. It's none of that stuff. I'm solid on food. If I don't get to eat today, it's okay. And so this whole thing of, I mean, elephants aren't on the planet just so we can eat them. And neither is things that are not to scale for us. I mean, I've walked through fields of wheat. You can't eat it. We don't have the digestive enzymes to digest the starches unless we cook them. So there's no argument that it's actually people food in any way, because people were here for, nobody knows exactly, but they say a couple million years before we started cooking food. They weren't eating pasta because there was no cooking. They had millions of years before there was fire. So the cooked food experiment is the new experiment. The high fat experiment is an even newer experiment. And those experiments have failed. They've shown us they failed. Now that we have the science to prove they failed, now that the results are coming in and we're seeing the obesity epidemic and the cancer and the heart disease and the diabetes, and we're seeing all these epidemics that we go, wow, you just don't even get those things on a low-fat, raw vegan diet. Those things don't exist. They're not there. Cancer can't happen on a low-fat, raw vegan diet. It's not that, okay, I certainly put in the first 25 years setting the stage for cancer. I'm not saying I'll never get it, because those first 25 years were the developmental years and they matter. And I can't undo them, but I can heal to the degree that I could heal and overcome that and feel great for the last 43 years where I haven't had illness and I just keep going strong. And people say, how are you so productive? The same as you. How are you so productive? Well, I'm healthy all the time and I need less sleep than I used to. I'm motivated and I can remember stuff. So I get stuff done. It's fun to get stuff done. I love to get stuff done. It means I can train harder and still recover in order to train hard again the next day. I don't need to take so many rest days from activity. If I'm recovering faster, I have more time in my day. I can get more done. I can write more, be a dad, be a husband, have time to do this and still go to the UK Fruit Fest for the rest of the day, and give. I love to give. I mean, I don't know whether it's just a human thing or whether it's just me, but I love to give. I love to give of myself in order to help others become more healthy. What do you say we do some questions?
Yes, absolutely. So as always on Chef AJ Live, the practice is to honor the people that took the time to write in first rather than go to the chat. So please consider going to chefaj.com and signing up to get my newsletter so that you know who's on and you can email us, because that is the best way. All right. So the first question is from Keisha. Could you please ask Dr. Graham, if someone wanted to do an all raw breakfast, lunch, and dinner, what specific low-fat foods would you tell someone to eat in order to get their daily requirements for calcium, vitamin E, and iodine?
Okay, well, that's a great question. And the way all those nutritional levels were determined initially was to look at the typical German diet. And then, because it was German scientists, so they looked at the typical German diet, checked out the nutrient levels of each of those things that a typical German person ate on a typical German diet, and say those are the normal values. And that has since been done in many countries. And occasionally that gets revised a little bit. And that is actually the way to come up with those normals. It's the smart way to come up with those normals. What they did wrong was they started with the typical German diet, or they started with the typical American diet, or this typical English diet, or the typical whoever. And had they started with what's a diet of fruits and vegetables give you, what does a diet of fruits and vegetables give you, and then do the nutritional assay on that, that would be the correct answer. Then you could say, oh, so they could look, for instance, at my diet, see what nutrients I take in, and then come up with the averages. And that should be right, because A, I've been healthy, B, I've been high level performance, my mind still works, everything still functions. I saw on a TV show once a bunch of doctors talking, and they said every man over 50 has enlarged prostate. I'm 68. I don't have an enlarged prostate. What's going on? I feel I got rooked. I got left out. Something, because I don't have all the things going wrong with me that's supposed to be going wrong with people my age. I'm not beyond time. I understand that, but things are working.
Are you able to tell your age? Is that okay to ask?
I'm 68. I don't mind telling people.
Wow, God, you look amazing. I thought you were much younger.
You know what? I look 68. I've not had surgeries. I wasn't blessed with great skin. I've got Eastern European skin, but it is what that part is. I'm not trying to look 25. I love that I feel like a kid, and I can think healthy thoughts that I'm going to keep going. I love that I'm making plans for 10 and 20 years from now of things that are going to be going on in my life. What do I want to look like? What do I want to feel like? What activities do I want to do? What do I want my posture to be 10 and 20 years from now? What books am I going to release, and which ones am I going to never get around to because I've got too many to do, and I'm going after them as fast as I can. So basically where we started was, there's 4 cravings. You can crave pasta, some kind of starch. You can crave starch, even though you know that it's actually paste, and you were told in school, don't eat the paste. There was only one kid in my class that ate the paste, and he was kind of weird. And you probably never ate the paste, but they do put salt and mint in it, which I don't understand. Why do they put salt? I understand why they put salt, but why did they put mint in it? But I wasn't the kid that ate the paste. Honest, I didn't eat the paste. But you were told don't eat paste, and then you're told to eat bread, rice, pasta, corn, potato, which is all paste. You're going to crave paste. You're going to crave sweets at the end of a meal, which is how we were trained. Because sweets are satiating, and so every chef around the world makes meals that end with something sweet, because that's the satiating part. People push away from the table. I can't eat anymore. Oh, but I've got room for dessert. Why not just start with dessert, satiate yourself, and then eat vegetables, because they're so much fun to eat. You're going to crave sweets in between meals. That could happen too. Or you're going to crave something refined, like alcohol or candy or chocolate or something that's a really concentrated sweet. And if any of those things happen, all of those keys are telling you that, or clues, they're all telling you that you didn't eat enough fruit at that meal to satisfy yourself until the next meal. The only other craving there really is, other than emotional stuff, which I'm not going to go into tonight, and that's Rosie's field, but the only other actual physical craving relating to food is one for salt. And when you're craving salt, it's just a clear and obvious thing that you haven't eaten enough vegetables. Because vegetables will always solve your salt needs. So really what we're talking about is a diet of fruits and vegetables. And you have to eat enough fruit so that you don't have any of those cravings. And then you have to eat enough vegetables so you don't crave salt. Which is a pretty simple answer. And what it boils down to answer the question, is fruit for breakfast, fruit for lunch, fruit before your dinner salad. Are there a million ways to put that together? Yes. As we said at my retreats, I always put vegetables on the table at lunch. I love to eat lettuce with my fruit. I love to eat celery with my fruit. I most enjoy eating cucumber with my fruit, but I eat a ton of vegetables. But typically, breakfast, lunch, and before dinner, if we were going to say 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and before dinner is all the fruit you care for, enough so that you don't have any of those cravings. And if you do have any of those cravings, you go, oh, I didn't eat enough fruit. I want some nuts after dinner. Oh, want something heavy after dinner? I'm going to eat nuts. I'm going to have a handful. Give me the bag of nuts. I'm going to hurt myself with nuts. And at the end of all that, then you realize actually nuts didn't do it. I want something sweet. It was really, so if you're craving nuts at the end of a meal, you're just not paying attention to your fruit needs. For me, I worked it out so I can eat fruit for breakfast, fruit for lunch, all the fruit I care for before dinner, and then have salad and salad and salad to the point where people go, how do you eat that much salad? I go, it takes practice, but I learned how to do it. Fortunately, I was always a big eater anyway. I like to eat a lot of volume. I would sit down and eat 2 whole pizzas, no problem. So that's that question.
Okay, like I don't ever want to like speak bad of people. That's not my thing.
Never.
But my mind,
unless it endangers somebody to not
right.
talk about
what I mean is
on.
like I find this subject really fascinating, and I agree with a lot of what you say. But then also, I got Dr. McDougall over on this shoulder. He's going to be a guest on Monday, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't agree with you. And I'm thinking maybe it'd be fun to have both you guys on and talk about this.
Dr. McDougall painted himself into a corner. Now he's got to defend the corner. But there's no way he can show me that we're natural starch eaters. There's nothing. He says we produce 3 times the amount of amylase that a gorilla does. Obviously, we're starch eaters. Well, a gorilla doesn't produce any. Such a microscopic amount that on a scale of 1 to 100, ours is only 3 to 4. The gorilla's is even lower. I'm fine with that, but that's because he doesn't ever eat any unripe fruit. Gorillas can't go out on skinny branches. So using a gorilla, which is our farthest away genetic cousin, all of the other anthropoid primates are much closer to us. All of them eat more fruit than a gorilla. In fact, if we look at, but that's a separate story. There's no way that starch can, basically what we're saying is Linus Pauling was wrong. We don't need vitamin C if we're going to make cooked starch the mainstay of our diet. And yet we know we do. We know we need vitamin C in massive doses, which is why he won a Nobel Prize. So I would like to see the show where you get Linus Pauling on with Dr. McDougall and let the 2 of them go at it.
Is he still alive?
No.
Oh, well, that's going to be difficult then.
Yes. You need a medium. You need a medium.
Well, listen to this question then. And I like this question from Phil because he says, I've been watching all the shows this week with great interest, and I particularly liked when Rosalind said yesterday, always look to nature for the answer, which is why I don't understand the statements being made about cooked food being addictive. I've never seen anyone in rehab from an addiction to steamed broccoli. It seems to me that many of the ingredients used on this week's shows, like tahini, almond butter, and raisins, which are not found in nature, would be much more addictive and deleterious to one's health than eating steamed vegetables. Is there anything in the medical literature to substantiate your claims that cooked food is addictive?
There's tons in medical literature. In fact, I have a good friend who recently died, so I can't have him on the show. But there's other people like him whose job was called food chemist. And he worked in the food industry his entire life as a food chemist. And he explained to me that the main role of the food chemist is to find substances to add to cooked food to the manufactured foods that make them more addictive. And there is you probably had Dr. Blaylock on your show already. If you haven't had Dr. Blaylock, he's just amazing. And he wrote a book called Excitotoxins. quite some years ago. And he talked about the substances, again, that are in a variety of cooked food products that are known as excitotoxins. They stimulate brain function while also being toxic to the brain. They melt your brain, basically. It's something that Philip K. Dick wrote about a long time ago called Substance D. But they stimulate while they also turn your brain to mush. And the classic example, the first time this was being told to us, was Lay's potato chips. Do you remember their motto?
Bet you can't eat just one.
Tell me that's not addiction.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, at least they're honest about it. They told you.
Okay. Now, let's look at it the other way. You come to my house. We're close friends. You go, I'm hungry. You got anything to eat? And I go, you know what? I was just going shopping. I got nothing in the house. I've been away and I just got back myself. Thanks for coming over, but I got nothing in the house. Oh, there's lettuce out in the back garden. There's great lettuce. Would you like some lettuce? And you go, no, I'm not hungry for lettuce. You got any chocolate? No, I'm not hungry for lettuce. You got any pizza? No, I'm not hungry for lettuce. But life starts after coffee. There's a difference between hunger and appetite.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Hunger is a nice word for craving. Craving is a nice word for addiction. So if you're hungry for something specific, that's addiction. If all you want is, you know what, it'd be nice to have something sweet and juicy. I don't really care what it is. That's not addiction. Now, is there middle ground? Conceivably, there's middle ground. I'm willing to openly, hey, steamed broccoli, is it middle ground? In a sense, it is. But in a sense, the science says absolutely not. Here's the chemistry that happens when we steam a broccoli. And these are the toxins that are formed. And these are the changes that happen. And is it still whole? No, it is no longer whole if it has been steamed. If we want proof of that, steam your face. Subject your face to the steam that we subject vegetables to, and you will be hospitalized. You're going to need a new face.
Why does it taste so good?
Taste is subjective. I like it too. I like it too. I was raised on it and I like it. And I like all cooked food. I like a Reuben sandwich. I like a cheeseburger. I like all sorts of things. And it tastes good. Now we have to ask a different question. Does a mango taste good?
Yeah, but it doesn't. Okay. With all due respect, I don't love fruit. Fruit does not satisfy me.
I get that.
I like it, but I don't love it. I prefer vegetables and starch over fruit. That's why I have a hard time wrapping my head around. Of course you prefer
starch. It's an addictive substance. Of course we prefer starch.
But why do I prefer vegetables over fruit? This doesn't make sense. Wait, vegetables have lower caloric density than fruit, yet I prefer them to fruit.
Okay. You don't need high caloric density. You're not a world-class athlete. You just need enough calories to get by. You need 1,500, 1,800 calories a day. You don't need like a massive. I'm working with guys who are eating 8,000 calories a day. Show them the vegetable diet that's going to give them 8,000 calories a day.
It's not going to happen.
Show me the world. Show me the Tour de France rider, 14,000 calories a day. Who's going to get that on vegetables? For me, as an adult male athlete eating 4,000 calories a day, we're talking 80 heads of lettuce per day. I can't eat 80 heads of lettuce per day. There's a volume problem. I had to go to fruit. But the anthropologists tell us that when we switched from an all vegetable diet, from all leaves to fruit and leaves, this increased caloric density is what fostered brain development. We got smarter because we ate fruit, but we reached potential that we otherwise couldn't reach before we started eating fruit. We were being dwarfed by eating only vegetables. But in the jungle, where leaves are ever present, it was easy to eat mostly leaves. When we discovered fruit, brain development. Now there's a biologist, I want to say Kathy Milton, but I won't swear that that's her name. And she says, maybe that wasn't it. Maybe the anthropologists were wrong. Maybe we got smarter eating fruit because we had to learn more and remember more, because leaves are ever present, but fruit only is seasonal. And you have to remember where in the jungle was the tree, when was it in season, which fruit made us sick, which fruit made us feel good. Maybe you don't ever have to eat a banana, AJ. Maybe you could get by with all of the low caloric density fruits, all of the acid fruits, and the fruits that are more like mangosteen, where you could eat it forever and get no calories, or longan, where you could eat 10 kilos of longan and still not get 100 calories. I don't know if that's actually true, but I've eaten 10 pounds of longan and finished it, and I'm starving. Like it's all flavor. It's not calories. There are lots of low calorie fruits that are designed, if you will, to the rose apple. It's designed to be enjoyed for its flavor, not for its caloric density. Yes, there are calorie dense fruits. I mean, I remember when I first showed Robbie the mamey, and he goes,
Oh, yeah,
wow, this is
everybody loves
amazing.
that. Everybody loves
And I
that.
said, you like it because it's got triple the caloric density of a banana. And he goes, no. And then we figured out the math, and he goes, oh yeah, it's actually got triple the calorie density of a banana. Well, great for a man who loves eating, wants to get that caloric density, wants to get the sugar hit. Mamey hits the bill, and so do lots of other fruits. There's lots of fruits more dense than a banana, and more dense than mamey even. Separate story. The question is not whether you love your husband. The question is whether your husband loves you. It's not whether we love pizza or bread or mango. I never ate food I didn't love, and I wouldn't eat food that I didn't love. The question is, does the food love you back? How much does the food love you back? Well, if we quoted T.C. Fry, he said that the first rule of eating is to do the absolute minimum of damage. He actually said, thou shalt not poison thyself, was his rule, his golden rule. And in the world of thou shalt not poison thyself, whole, fresh, ripe, raw, organic fruits and vegetables do the minimum poisoning job. Do they still have toxins in them? For sure. But the minimum is going to be found in fruits and vegetables. By the time we add in steamed, we've added in another factor of, and the science will show us, as I said, tumorigens, tremogens, mutagens, teratogens, carcinogens, they're all there. It's just whether or not we want to turn a blind eye to them. Next question. So it's not whether you love the food, it's whether the food loves you.
Thank you. This question is from Rachel. Can you please ask Dr. Graham if he juices at all, if he eats fermented foods, and his opinion on bee pollen?
Okay, I had bee pollen, I had an anaphylactic shock to bee pollen, thought I was going to die. Fortunately, I lived, but it was that close. I really thought I was going to die. My throat just closed. Boom. But I'm a vegan in philosophy and in practice whenever it works. If I have to break veganism in order to save the life of a patient, I would do it in a heartbeat. The life of the patient beats my philosophy every time. But I'm a vegan by philosophy, and by philosophy, no animal needs to work in order for me to live, so I'm not going to eat bee pollen. They don't have to, that's their pollen for them to have. Do I ever juice? I will make orange juice and then use the pulp for some other thing. I will make other kinds of juices for special occasions and then use the pulp for some other recipe, because I'm a whole food kind of guy. So in terms of, but I'm also a chef. So in terms of delivery, to put it on the table, I will sometimes separate the pulp from the juice in order to create a clarified tomato juice, which is lovely, right? Or orange juice that doesn't have pulp in it. But then I'm going to use that pulp. I'm going to make apple juice. I'm going to use the pulp to make apple cookies or something, ginger apple cookies. I'll use everything. So it's delivery. Do I use juices? Do I think if the question had something to do with are juices better than whole food? No, in every single way. And I can tell you 100 ways, juices are not better. They're not more digestible. They're not easier to deal with. Last I checked, every nutrition book says fiber is a valuable and important imperative nutrient. Why would we remove the fiber? We're falling into a very trained way of thinking where people tell us, oh yes, if you add fiber to your breakfast cereal, that makes it better for you. But if we remove fiber from our juices, that makes it better for you too. And that's a contradiction that can't possibly be, when in fact we've all been taught and knew that the primary first pillar of healthful eating is whole food. So adding fiber or removing it can't make it better. If I come to your house and you say, hey, would you like a carrot juice? Sure, I'll drink it. But 364 days out of the year, nah. Will I have orange juice? Yes, like I say, I'll take orange juice, and because basically, I mean, for most oranges in my juicer, there's very little pulp left, but that's going in my salad dressing anyway.
Nice. Thank you. All right, here is a question from, what's it from? What's the name? Ellie. Dr. Graham, if weight loss is your goal, can you still add chia and flax to your fruit and veggie smoothie, especially since one is not supposed to mix fat with fruit? And do you think as a 52-year-old menopausal high raw woman, I may need to increase my fat intake? Right now, the only overt fat in my diet is 1 teaspoon each of chia, flax, and tahini daily. Is this too low? Lately been experiencing stiff finger joints on my right hand, taking B12.
Okay, so I can't do medical advice here in the show. I wouldn't even think of it without taking a history on anyone. If the only fats you're consuming is a couple of tablespoons of seeds, I don't see any worry with that. If you're trying to lose weight, you're much better off to eat fruits and vegetables than to consume. If you're trying to lose fat, then eating fat isn't really the way to lose fat. For me, I would say, you know what, maybe do a month of no fat and see how that works for you. And if you like that, or a week even of no fat, it's not that hard to do. Eat just fruits and vegetables. This isn't, the beauty of this is that eating fruits and vegetables isn't the penalty, it's the prize. So I love sweet and juicy. Everybody loves sweet and juicy because we eat cake and coffee and we call it sweet and juicy. We eat cookies and milk and we call it sweet and juicy. We've just perverted what is sweet and juicy, but everybody loves it. Even the people who tell me I never eat sweets. And then I go, really, you don't ever eat like dessert? And they go, oh yeah, I meant candy. I don't eat candy, but I'll eat cake and cookies and pie or ice cream. I'll eat sweet things. And the amount varies to the individual. How much? I mean, if you're trying to keep calories low, adding in the concentrated calories from seeds isn't really a plus, especially ground seeds. Now, when you eat flax, it depends on whether they're ground or not. Chia depends on whether it's ground or not. If it's not, you're probably only using it as a thickener. You're going to poop out all of those seeds. The tahini, a little bit different story because those are ground seeds.
So
and that makes
chia seeds have to be ground as well? Chia seeds, even though they're so small, have to be ground?
In order to access the fats that are inside them, okay, they produce a mucilage when they get wet. And we use it as a thickener. And it helps you, it helps foods pass through you. But in order to actually access the fats inside the chia seeds, I mean, they pass through undigested. So unless you grind them, you're not going to make those fats accessible. Same with chia, with flax. I'm not against eating them, but I would say if you went into a field of flax seeds, that you'd probably never eat more than 10 or 12 flax seeds in your whole life because it's a royal pain to try to harvest flax seeds by hand. Whereas if I'm in a field of mango trees, I'm golden.
Well, you mentioned flaxseed, and there's actually a question from Jill saying there's a popular autoimmune disease protocol going around where they're recommending putting a half a cup of flax seeds in your smoothie. Do you think that's too much?
First of all, it's an unnecessary amount of fat, most likely. But second of all, you have to think, what fats would we eat in nature? And I mean, I have gone out in fields of flax. It's commonly grown where I live. And it's just it's the most slow process. You can, I don't know if you ever collected like morning glory seeds. It's slower than trying to do that. It's a really slow process to get the flax seeds out. And then you've got them in your hand, and the tiniest wind comes along and you've got nothing in your hand again. It can be very frustrating. Whereas avocados, they're pretty easy to eat. Get the fats out of those, or durians, get the fats out of those. My entire concept of health is so different from the way that mainstream and alternative medical people teach health, because I'm not trying to prevent disease or fight disease or resist disease or cure disease, or have really anything to do with disease. What I want to teach people how to do is to participate in those activities, foods, substances, forces, influences, and conditions that result in health, the requirements of health. And the more we do the healthy things, the higher level of health we experience. That's a law. That's a law of nature. And it's a law of nature that we prove with every house plant. We prove with every farm animal. We prove it with every human baby. The more we give them what they need, the more they develop into who they can become. So my entire approach, when sick people come to me in order to get well, we don't try to fight disease. We don't try to cure the disease or eliminate it or cut it out or anything of that nature, suppress it in any way. We simply let's supply what's needed for health, and health will take over automatically, because health is the default state for human beings. Health is your birthright. Health is the default state. If we give a human what they need to be healthy, they will be healthy, because that's the law.
Great, thanks. I've got another super chat donation from Pat G. So thank you very much. Yeah, I like what you said about, would you eat that much fat in nature? And nuts were not accessible the way they are now, like Costco. And so like this idea with many of the plant-based doctors who I'm friends with and admire, that we have to eat nuts every day to prevent heart disease. And I just think about that, because, and again, there's doctors that are not plant-based and doctors that are plant-based that are even advocating a high-fat keto diet, or even saying that olive oil is good for brain health and even maybe protective cardiovascularly. And I'm trying to think, there was no oil in nature. So, and the first time I was exposed to the raw diet was early in the 2000s, and it was all about gourmet raw. And there were restaurants like Giuliano's and Olac and Roxanne's. I mean, these were delicious meals, but they were basically fat.
Yeah, it's fat and salt.
Yeah.
It's fat and salt. And they could make fat and salt taste really good, but it's really tough to digest. And most people pay a price after eating it. And the stories are profound of the prices that were paid. And I don't knock those guys. And I appreciate the awareness that they helped. And most of them are close friends, and I, stay in touch with them. But even they say, hey, this isn't for everyday eating, right? This is not everyday dining. And most of them don't eat that way themselves. If we don't supply the carbohydrates we need, we simply don't have the energy. It's called hitting the wall. Most people are hitting the wall all the time, and athletes don't ever want to hit the wall in performance. And it's all about carbohydrate intake. The uptake, transport, and delivery of carbohydrates to the cells is impaired. And when it's impaired, the disease condition that we get is called diabetes, because the sugar can get into the blood, but it can't get out. So we're seeing that happen all the time on a high-fat diet. It simply is unsustainable. Basically, what these raw fooders are teaching us is that their approach doesn't work, and that 80-10-10 does. They're supporting 80-10-10 by showing us, oh, well, look, it can be done with high fat, but not for very long. or it can be done on a keto program as an intervention, as Tim Trader talked about the other day. Like keto was first introduced. Okay, well, he was right and he was wrong. Keto was most recently introduced as a concept for dealing with people having seizures, epileptics, and they found that it did make some effect on their epilepsy, and then it caught on in other ways. We saw it coming, but the idea of keto wasn't always called keto. It's been called several different names, and it's been introduced every 20 years for the last 120 years. And every 20 years, it has come around again and again and again. In the 60s, when I was a kid, 50s actually, when I was a little kid, I remember there was these white plastic bottles of liquid protein diet, and people were going on the liquid protein diet, and that was the popular thing. But a lot of people died on a liquid protein diet, and they eventually pulled it off the grocery store shelves, only to reintroduce it 20 years later as the liquid protein diet again. But the only way you could get access to it was through a prescription from your doctor. You had to be doctor monitored in order to go on the liquid protein diet in the 80s. Eventually, Atkins came up with a plan to get as close to liquid protein diet as possible without going on liquid protein, to just put you on the fat and protein diet, which was one of the first high fat approaches. But they've all been, I find it funny. Personally, I find it funny. They say you can eat all the fat you want.
Yeah, like that book.
As if people weren't already doing that.
I know, exactly.
Or you can eat all the mayonnaise you want, but there's nothing to put it on. You can have all the butter you want, but nothing to put it on. I mean, to me, it was just hilarious. But it's come around every 20 years. It's been generational, because the last generation doesn't remember the generation before the mistake, made by the generation before, and they have to make it again. And so there was the Atkins. We call it the Atkins approach. It dates us to call it the Atkins approach, because then there's the next one. Now it's the keto approach, and there was an approach. There was the one with a French name back in the 1920s, and there was one around 1900. And as Dr. Clapper, our dear friend, Dr. Clapper, talks about, even in 1880, the first high-fat experiment was being done back then, because we got motorized vehicles. We could start to increase the size of our herds. Meat became more readily available. The first high-fat experiment was done in 1880. It's failed every single time. I mean, if your batting average was 0, every single time you just didn't hit the ball, how long do you get to stay on that team?
But people stay on it, and it's, even though it's unsatisfying and unhealthy. So what is it? Just the caloric density, the addictive properties of the fat that makes them not
well, the thing is, you say they stay on it, but we don't have anybody that's been doing that for 40 years and shows us ideal heart health at the end of 40 years. I looked at a great program by again, like you said, don't name names. So a guy who's a keto promoter, pretty famous in the keto movement. And he showed, here's how I ran a marathon on the keto diet. And he showed his diet for, months. And he's on the keto diet up until a week before the marathon. And then he switched to 80-10-10. He switched to only fruits and vegetables for a week, ran his marathon, and then went back onto his high fat approach. And he said, and that's how you run a marathon on a keto diet. And I go, wait a minute, you didn't. You ran it on 80-10-10. Your diet's 10-10-80, and you switched it over to 80-10-10 in order to run the marathon, and then called it the keto diet. It's not. It just wasn't. It couldn't be done. And so we see, when you go to the health conferences and you see the different people who are on different diets, and you can pick them out. I was at the North American Vegetarian Congress one year. It was in Carolina, North Carolina. And I was sitting with another dear friend of ours, Victoria Moran, and we were picking out who's on what diet. And there's people walking as if they were in a rut. And we go, those are the macrobiotic people. They're so grounded. They walk as if they're rooted. They're in a trough. And then there was people bouncing off the walls. And there was 9 fitness instructors that year at the North American Vegetarian Congress. How many of the fitness instructors do you think were raw fooders?
None.
9. All 9 fitness instructors at the North American Vegetarian Congress that particular year were raw food enthusiasts. They were all raw fooders. Nobody else was teaching fitness except raw fooders. It was like, oh yeah, fitness, because and here's why it's important. I think it's an important thing to understand that if you do nothing all day, every day, your calorie needs go down, but your nutrient needs don't. And if you lower your calorie intake, you lower your nutrient intake. When people ask a person eating 1,500 calories a day, where do you get your protein? And then they ask a guy eating 4,500 calories a day of the same food. He's eating triple the calories. He's eating triple the protein. Where do you get your calcium? Eating triple the calories, it's no problem. But if we just meet nutrient needs, it does not, if we just meet calorie needs, it does not mean we've met nutrient needs. Oddly enough, the question before was about calorie loss, fat loss. And to lose fat, you've got to eat less calories. But nobody ever worries about nutrition while they're trying to lose 50 or 100 pounds. They never say, oh, and where do you get your protein? Because there's plenty to go around. So it's funny that the questions get asked while we're losing weight. Oh, no questions about nutrition at the moment, please. And then when you're eating more, which is when you're taking in more nutrients, then people are questioning. The oddest question of all got asked to me by a person who was making a salad, a salad. Okay. No, essentially no calories in a salad, right? Okay, there's maybe 100. It's hard to eat much more than 100 calories a salad unless you're practiced. While making the salad, she's pouring olive oil on the salad. Okay, she wants to do that, fine. But, we're not measuring by the teaspoon, we're pouring oil. And when you pour oil, you're pouring 300, 400, 500, 600, 700 calories worth of oil onto a salad pretty quickly. Which means on a 100 calorie salad, if you've got 400 calories of oil, it's 80% fat. And her question to me, where do I get my protein? And I'm thinking, your salad is 80% fat and there was no protein in olive oil. Where do you get your protein? Like, maybe I even fattened up my salad. I put a few nuts on it, or I put some avocado on it, but there's protein in those things. There's protein in the vegetables themselves. I get plenty of protein. In fact, when you eat cooked food, those people should be worrying, where do they get their protein? Because my teacher in school, my physiology teacher in school explained to me the biochemistry of heating protein. When we create those enzyme-resistant, cross-linked proteins, we make them inaccessible to the human body. So even though we eat the proteins, as we said, the body responds to it like it's a foreign invader. We can't make use of those proteins. Where do you get your protein is a question every cooked fooder should be asking themselves. What they're actually doing, though, is proving to themselves that they don't need much protein. You really don't. You're not growing. You're not going to get taller. You're not going to add 50 kilos of muscle. We're not growing like that as adults. Protein becomes a non-factor. Which is why protein isn't used in intensive care units, even for patients who are in comas.
Right. Has there ever been a large successful population of people eating 80-10-10, like people that actually went to war and were able to fight battles?
Well, 80-10-10 is a relatively new concept. So there haven't been civilizations. And cooked food kind of took over. Tell me that's not an addiction. I'm
sure you've read Catching Fire by Wrangham, right?
Sure. But I've also read Dune by Frank Herbert. And Frank Herbert, he said, if everybody in the entire planet is addicted to the same stuff, then it's not a problem and it's not considered a problem, right? They all had to have spice. But he was talking about coffee. You can't live without coffee. And he wasn't talking about cooked food, but the people who can't get past cooked food are telling me they're addicted. They're making it clear. Oh, I can't imagine life without cooked food. Oh, well, then you're addicted.
Oh,
It's that simple. AJ, give me a month. Like you just listened to 5 pretty powerful presentations, I think.
It's not even, here's the thing. Let me just say this.
It's a month.
One of the
Can
things
you go a month?
one day I might want to do it.
Because even you said, oh, I did the raw food thing, but I didn't do 80-10-10.
No, I did not. And that
Give me
was
a
the
month.
problem. And that's why I was very unsatisfied and stayed so heavy, because I was turning to the fat.
Give me a month.
But here's the thing. So one of the things I teach, and I like to come to a point of agreement. We agree on low fat, no sugar, no oil, no
Absolutely.
salt, and eating lots of fruits and vegetables. But even in the program I teach, which is much less restrictive than 80-10-10, I always tell people, because I think about this phenomenon that Dr. Lyle talks about called the ego trap, where if the bar is set too high, sometimes people kick over the table and will fail. So I tell people, eat the least restrictive diet that you can do that will give you the results you seek. Because for some
I'm
people,
in full agreement with you.
when
you're ready, give me a month.
But I mean, it might be fun to do like an experiment or to do a month and to see if I could do it, because I love challenges like that.
I'll talk to you every day for that month.
Maybe we'll do it
in private conversation, but I'll talk to you every day.
It could be interesting, and I'll say what my results are. But I maybe I am addicted, but I love the feeling of when I eat starch and I get sleepy, because I'm such a hyper person that raw food just gets me even more amped up.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. And you just described it so beautifully. Like Pink Floyd wrote a song, right? Roger Waters wrote a song for Pink Floyd called Comfortably Numb. And a lot of people prefer to be comfortably numb. Oh, I like to get sleepy from my food. I don't want my food to make me sleepy. I'm a performance guy. I want to eat my food so I can continue performing. And yes, I openly admit that I need less sleep on raw food, but I like that.
I have a great idea. I can't promise it, but I don't like to give too much of my secrets in advance with upcoming shows. But there is going to be a period this year where there's going to be another like 8 or 10 days of raw. It's just going to be cooking demos though. That might be a good day or a good time. I don't know. I don't know if I can commit to a month, but during these shows, there's 10 days. I might be able to do 10 days, because it would be great, because I have all these chefs on. And next week we have 4 raw chefs on. We're doing Iron Chef. And I did take some of your ingredient suggestions into play. Let me, now
I'm not going to ask how old you are, but how long have you given cooked food?
Well, I'm 61 and a half. And
so you probably eaten 55, 60 years of cooked food.
Oh, yeah.
And you won't give raw food a month?
No, well, listen, Dr. Lyle is my psychologist. He says, never make a big decision when a small decision will do. So I want to commit to 10 days at first.
That's good advice.
That doesn't mean that I won't, but I feel that I do better when I don't.
I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm only playing with you.
Yeah. No, anyway, so here's we're finally getting.
What do you say, folks? Should AJ give me a month?
Well, maybe, but I'd like to do it with the viewers. I'd like us all to do it together and kind of do I think 10 days is good to start. And if it works out, we can do a month. But I'd like to see if I feel differently now, trying it again. I don't know if
you'd overcome addictions in 10 days. I've never heard that you can.
No, I'm not trying to overcome addictions. I'm just trying to see what it feels like. Because
until you overcome it, you can't even give a fair evaluation.
All right. Well, I can't listen, just take what you get. Okay. So here's an interesting question from a live viewer named Rachel. Dr. Graham, I am hyponatremic and I've been told to eat more table salt. That doesn't appeal to me. Could you share some fruits and veggies that are higher in sodium?
Sure. First of all, let's understand why you're hyponatremic, okay? Because some people produce a hormone called aldosterone more than other people produce aldosterone. We don't all produce the exact same amount. Aldosterone controls how much sodium you lose from your blood and how much you keep. By affecting the way the kidneys work. And when we consume salt, we lower our aldosterone production. And by lowering aldosterone production, you lose more salt. So the more salt you eat, effectively, the more salt you lose. If you want to raise aldosterone production, you stop eating salt, and then your body starts to do what's called sparing of the sodium rather than trying to throw off the excess sodium. So we can get the problem with aldosterone production, like the last conversation we just had, is that it doesn't happen overnight. In order to get aldosterone production back up to full normal can take as much as a year, even though 90% normal could probably be reached in about a month. So until we get to that point, hyponatremia can be a problem. And as AJ agreed with me, like if you tend to go low in sodium, then you need to eat more vegetables until that stops happening. Vegetables that tend to be higher. Celery is the classic one. Celery is higher than most vegetables, except for a wide variety of what are known as marsh vegetables. There's a lot of vegetables that grow near the seaside at different longitudes. Latitudes are this way. Longitudes. At different longitudes. At different latitudes, right? Different temperature zones, latitudes, at different latitudes. So the tropical one, there's one called sea purslane that I like very much. It tastes almost identical to olive. There's ones that grow more like in northern parts of the United States, on both coasts, that are various marsh grasses that are very salt. They can grow in that marshy water, that's got some salt in it, and the plants themselves uptake salt. I'm trying to think of the names of some. I don't tend to eat them much. Samphire one of them, I think, and there's a couple others. It's easy to look them up and come up with names of high sodium vegetables that are all the marshy vegetables, marshy grasses. If it's truly hyponatremic, it's one thing, but in the human body, there are 12 different salts that are called mineral salts. And you may be going low in some of those other mineral salts, in which case it might not be sodium specifically. So for instance, tomatoes taste very salty, but they're not high in sodium. They're high in potassium chloride, which is another one of the salts found in the body. So it depends how they're defining. Like in chemistry, a salt is a combination of minerals. And so it depends on whether we're saying you're actually low in sodium or low in any one of these other, what I think in naturopathy, they might refer to as cell salts. There's a dozen different salts found in the cells. I don't know if that helps.
Again,
Eat all your vegetables. Eat lots of vegetables. But the trick is there's no way to create sodium balance within the body while you're still consuming salt. Really, salt has to go.
Yeah. Great, thanks. I don't like to call people out by name because I want to stay friends with everyone, but there is a doctor that says that in his experience, a lot of people that have followed raw food for long term have problems that are either mental or dental. Have you heard of that? And do people are there any very old raw fooders that we could talk to see how they're doing?
Interesting question. There's no, the reason most people go vegetarian in the States, let's say, not around the world, but the reason most people go vegetarian and then go vegan and then go raw is because of health problems. I mean, that's really the big thing. Yes, there's the animals, and yes, there's the environment, and there's all kinds of other reasons, but the reason we're pushed, when push comes to shove, is my doctor said, or I realized I couldn't keep eating the way I was, so I changed my diet. And we change our diet to vegetarian, we change to vegan, we change to raw for our health. I did it for sports performance, but still as sort of a subset of health. And because of this, so for instance, when I used to go to natural hygiene conventions when it was a little different than it is today, but I would meet lots of people in their 80s and 90s and hundreds who were eating primarily raw foods. But they didn't look necessarily the picture of health. But then again, they were 90 and 100 and 100 plus. And I met them over and over annually, all the time at health conferences. And I'd say, why did you change your diet? And they go, well, I got to be 68 and my health really declined. And the doctor told me I wasn't going to live another 4 years. And here I am 38 years later, still ticking. And so we have to realize, like, no, my daughter's 16. She hasn't eaten cooked food. When she gets to 100, there'll be an old person doing raw food, but I don't know if it counts even to say, I'm talking to a guy this week. He's 90 years old. He wants to become a raw fooder. Well, he's going to be an old raw fooder, but he's not going to be a long-term raw fooder. If he gets another 10 or 20 years at raw food, that'll be pretty cool. But he's not going to say, I did it all my life. It's like looking at a bodybuilder who goes vegan and then shows his pictures. He didn't build those muscles on vegan food, and he didn't build it on cooked food. He built it in the gym. It wasn't the food. It was the exercise, a specific kind of exercise. And to credit the food is silly because food doesn't make you grow muscle and it doesn't make you lose muscle. There was more to that question than just long-term raw fooders. And what else was in that question?
But are there people that do it and that maybe are experiencing problems? Because one of the things I'm seeing, Dr. Graham, is
teeth and bones.
Because a lot of people do have teeth problems, jaw problems, TMJ, and they find that it's a difficult way of eating when you have dental problems.
So as Rosie talked about yesterday, a lot of people with mental emotional problems end up eating restrictive diets. I don't look at 80-10-10 as restrictive in any way. I eat hundreds of different fruits every year. I eat dozens of different vegetables every year. I'll match my food variety against the variety of anyone on earth. I think I eat more variety than most people do. There's 100 different kinds of bananas. There's dozens of different kinds of grapes. There's so many vegetables. It's crazy. And I love all those fruits and vegetables and eat massive varieties of food. I haven't found on 80-10-10 mental problems accruing, but I have seen mental problems accrue when people try to go strict fruitarian. I have seen people try to eat only watermelon and lose their mind in the process. I have seen people try to eat only orange and lose their teeth in the process. I knew a man who tried to eat only tomatoes and lost most of his bone calcium in the process. None of this kind of things has anything to do with what I'm recommending. I'm recommending a diet where meals are incredibly simple because that makes for optimum digestion. But the diet includes huge variety throughout the course of the year because that makes for optimum nutritional sufficiency. So we're looking at variety as being an integral part. Are there ways to do the vegan diet wrong? Absolutely. Are there ways to do vegetarian wrong? Absolutely. Are there ways to do a raw diet incorrectly? Absolutely. But we have to think, who goes to a doctor? Doctors only see people who did something that resulted in ill health. Otherwise, they never see the healthy people. Healthy people avoid doctors at all costs. So the doctors who have seen things go wrong, sure, they see, and no doubt, things go wrong. If you try to live on just dates, you're going to end up with teeth problems. If you try to eat any only sticky food, you're going to end up with teeth problems. Food that sticks to your teeth, starch sticks to your teeth, for instance, because it's paste. So Let's call it what it is. I know I'm making a point, but if I just said, yeah,
Well,
fruits
I
and
mean, I agree
vegetables
with
are
you about pasta and bread, but I can't, you cannot take away my beloved sweet potatoes. I will
okay.
die.
Okay. I'm not saying take them away. I'm
Yeah,
saying,
I
although I
know.
would say give me a month, I'm not saying take them away. The cool thing about give me a month or give me a year is at the end of that experiment, there'll still be cooked food available. Nobody's making that illegal just yet. Although there are laws in California, there's laws that you can't cook food that's a starchy food unless you put a sign in the restaurant saying that we're producing carcinogenic gases that are in the air, and the sign is on the restaurant wall of every restaurant in California. They stopped us from cooking using trans fats, right? So no restaurants can use trans fats anymore. There are now 3 different no more cooking rules allowed. There will be a 4th coming soon. As soon as the first cancer case gets legally, where the guys say, oh, the carcinogens from your grill made my baby develop cancer. Oh man, there's gonna come a time. Can you imagine the time where the guy in the raincoat opens up his coat and says, want to buy some cooked food? Because when it becomes socially unacceptable, we see how quickly the word gets out these days. We can affect the zeitgeist of the people really quickly to a point where they go, wow, there was more raw fooders in 1900 than there is today. And all that happened was they said, no, 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 germs. You got to cook your food, germs. It could happen again, but right now the raw food movement is I hate to say, catching fire. It's
Wow.
growing like crazy. It's
Nice.
mushrooming. The word is getting out because it's hard to keep a truth down. Whole, fresh, ripe, or organic fruits and vegetables are the best for you. If you deserve the best, then eat more whole, fresh. If you
Right.
if
Regardless
you
of what you're eating or not eating, more fruits and vegetables. Stop eating
yes,
crap.
even you and even me, if we can increase the amount of whole, fresh, ripe, or organic fruits and vegetables on our plate every day, we're going in a healthy direction. And direction is more important than speed. I'm not trying to tell anybody that it's only about speed, that you have to make an overnight. It doesn't have to be overnight.
Do you ever eat anything like a raw sweet potato? And if so, is there a way to prepare it that's enjoyable?
Yeah, there's lots of ways. Although the nicest way I've seen is cut in ultra fine strips that you would call noodles, but they're like straight fine. Like you could use them in your hair to hold your hair up, like like you put chopsticks in your hair. You could cut them like chopsticks, and they're pretty nice, but they're not. I wouldn't want a whole salad of that. I would want that in a salad. You can eat a little of it. I just don't mess with it. It doesn't love me back as much as I love it.
Yeah. So I would love to keep talking to you, but I actually have to
We did a lot. We
on
covered
somebody
some
else's
ground.
show. But I want to ask you because Rosalind mentioned yesterday that you make the most delicious kale chips. Would you tell us about them?
Yeah, I make delicious kale chips. I throw all the good stuff into kale chips, and I don't hold back on that. It started out as a way to get more vegetables into my daughter. We're thinking that maybe she wasn't eating enough vegetables because she really likes fruit a lot, and we want to introduce vegetables too. But now, I mean, she eats as much salad as I do, so it's not the same issue. But kale chips are pretty simple. Like a salad, it has to have a fat and an oil. To satisfy most people, although it doesn't really need to have a fat, you could just do celery and blueberries and dress a salad with celery and blueberries, and you're fine. It doesn't have to have a fat. Kale chips, my basic ingredients for kale chips, about 4 lemons per kilo. So I have a kilo of, so two lemons per pound. We're in the States, right? 2 lemons per pound of kale. All the tomato you care for, lots of tomato. At least 1 entire bunch of celery, or 2. Any flavor you want. I don't care what flavor you want after that. You could throw in some beets and have it be a beet flavor. You could make your own homemade curry powder and throw in curry powder. You could put in Italian herbs. Any flavor you want will do. It could just be garlic and onion. It could be whatever flavor you want that particular batch of kale chips to be. And then per pound of kale, about, depending on you, a quarter pound to a half a pound, probably a quarter pound, whatever that is in volume, I don't exactly know, of almonds. Or if you prefer some other nut, fine, but I find it works really well with almonds. I blend that down to, if it's too runny, I'll add in some dehydrated tomatoes that I dehydrate myself. So then, I can make it thicker right there. I don't have to dehydrate so much. I want the sauce to stick to the kale, not to the dehydrator sheets. So I'll dry it a little bit to make it thicker. But that's all it takes. It's basically lemon, tomato, celery, and almond.
Sounds
In big,
fantastic.
yeah. But I mean, on 2 pounds of kale, I've got a Vitamix blender full to the very top. In order to be enough, there's got to be plenty of sauce. It's not, people say, all my neighbors say, oh, make me kale chips, make me kale chips. I'll pay you for kale chips. I'm good. You don't understand how expensive this is. A little bit of kale. This isn't a cheap mixture that I'm making, which is funny, right? Because kale was what poor people used to eat. It wasn't for rich people. It's one of those misnomers about dark green leafy vegetables. You don't need dark green leafy vegetables, but they do. Kale chips are a wonderful texture and a great delivery system. And I never make them the same. I have made them without lemon and just used orange juice or grapefruit juice or lime juice. It all works. Any citrus will do. I've done it without tomatoes and just used sweet bell peppers instead, and that works. But I prefer tomato celery. I mean, tomato celery is just hard to beat. It's just tomato, celery, lemon, almond. You're done, and any flavor you want. Kale chips.
Delicious. It's just, it does dehydrating things. They're a little bit labor intensive, but so worth it.
Oh, so worth it. I mean, my daughter eats probably 2 kilos of kale chips a week still. She loves it.
She loves it. Well, maybe she'll come on sometime. We'd love to see a perspective from a young person doing this.
She's doing her first presentation ever this week at the UK Fruit Fest. And she's been asked many times, but she's a little microphone shy. But her day's coming.
All right. Well, when she's ready, let's have her on.
I would love to introduce you to her just to make friends.
Great. Well,
thank you for giving me such a platform. Thank you for making so much time. Thank you for offering to do a month of raw food.
Well, wait, I did not offer. Hello,
sorry,
I said
I forgot.
10 days.
Say that.
It turns out it's 11 days, and I haven't committed yet. But also, what I'm trying to tell the people that are interested, that I don't want them to feel that if they're not 100%, they can't participate. The idea is to
absolutely
whatever
not.
They're doing.
Increase the percentage of whole, fresh, ripe, organic food.
That is what because that
is easier and easier with practice. It's just something to get used to, and all of a sudden you go, actually, I like the way I feel. It becomes its own self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, oh,
I just have a feeling I'm not going to last a day. But we'll see. Especially because I'm doing it when it's cold here in October. It's like I could see it now with watermelon, but there's no watermelon in October. So anyway, we'll see, Dr. Graham. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
You know what? What's the temperature in your house?
Oh, we keep it at about 82.
Winter and summer.
Yeah, we kind of just keep it at 82 all the time. And everybody says it's too hot in here. But I'm
why
always
would
cold.
it matter?
Yeah,
why would it matter the temperature of your food? If you're...
I don't know, because I like good food.
Okay, so all I'm saying is that the excuses start coming in really quickly, don't they?
Listen, everybody's an addict. We just have different substances. That's the way I look at it. So, all right. Well, thanks.
I love being free. I love working off of preferences. I love living my life off of preferences rather than addictions. It's a great thing to get free.
I hear you. Thank you so much. And thanks all of you for watching another episode of
thank you for
Live.
What an amazing thing you did this week. Bless you.
Oh, thank you.
Bless you, AJ.
And
Yep.
bless all of you for hanging in here. I hope you'll come back tomorrow when I have a wonderful doctor on named Kofi Assel. He's a pediatrician and you won't want to miss it. Thanks
If
again.
anybody wants to come to Food and Sport and check out what I've got, we've got the largest FAQ on the web. We got more information you could ever shake a stick at, loads of free recipes. See you at Food and Sport. It's just 10 letters, the word food, the letter N, and the word sport, foodandsport.com. Come visit.
Great. Thanks, Dr.